Good Wednesday to you all in Comp 651. Welcome again to week, boom, bam, 14, and a review of the discussion questions from week 13. As I said I would, I posted the discussion questions for this week's reading, okay? And we're going to cover the discussion questions from week 13. So you have some, you know, more in the way of information and consideration about those questions as a means by which you prepare for your final exam. Okay, so before we get into the questions, let's finish the very last, because it's like 3:30 or something of the coffee. I mean, energetic as I am, I do need to get my sleep. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the question. The cold persists, but it's getting better. Week 13, question number 1. Consider your readings in stack. That's chapter 12 and 13. From those readings, please list and briefly discuss 2 sampling errors that are common in PR quantitative research. And I intended it that these questions, week 13, go hand in glove with week 12. I was having a discussion with a member of the class a little bit earlier during my office hours. And as we talked about a number of things, it occurred to me that one of the misperceptions about public relations is that public relations is the person standing at the podium or making the commercial or the PSA, the public service announcement. That is that public relations is the ja. No, that might be the tip of the spear, but the bulk, the majority, the part and parcel of what public relations is all the accurate information that backs up and forms that statement. Actor portrayal, that's a dime a dozen. Solid, verifiable, reliable information. That's at the heart of what makes good public relations. So, if what you think is public relations is the front face, but what we're spending a lot of time with is the research, well, that's because that's what it is. Okay, so 2 sampling errors. Let's take a look. Hillary, you went first. Coverage errors occur when your sample list is out of date and can be alleviated with historical research. Such research includes probing the sampling limitations of the list and discovering if the names of those not included in the list are available and how the list is updated. Measurement errors occur when people misunderstand questions and therefore provide answers that do not accurately represent them. Okay, good response, both of them. Of those 2, I can speak to you from experience. It is the second that is number 1, most common, and number 2, most problematic. I spent a lot of time reviewing surveys, that is helping people craft surveys and writing surveys. And one of the things that I find is common by way of mistake is survey writers, me, you, everybody else, we tend to write in language and in construction, and I mean, choice of words and how they're put together in a way that makes sense to us, but may or may not make sense to an audience. It is a skill, an acquired skill, to think about the meaning of a statement or the question from someone else's perspective, to in a sense develop an intuitive voice, if you will, of someone else in your head. Yes, how would someone else say this, and how would someone else understand this? Okay. But you have one more here, Hillary, and we'll cover that here. Lastly, sampling errors occur when only a subset of the population is selected and is reduced with probability sampling. That is true. That can be a problem. Only if the subset is not statistically significant. Okay. If you're trying to make a prediction about the larger population, and we're talking, anywhere from between like 3,000 and up, you need a sample size of, you could get away with 200 and say, well, the conclusions that we draw from these 200 can be projected out to the general populace, but you're much, much better off with a sample size of about 300 or more. That becomes statistically significant. And even there, and watch for this when you read the results of polls and sampling. Even there, properly, you should say suggests, indicates, points to, rather than is certain, for sure, absolute. Okay, because statistically significant does not mean entirely representative. Okay, so if you have a statistically significant sample, this does not mean it's entirely representative of the whole population. It's just mathematically significant relative to the whole population. Okay, good answer, Hillary. Question number 2. According to Stacks, what is the relationship between sampling size and curve shape? In addition, please explain using plain, simple language what is meant by the term confidence interval. Okay, before I read your answer, I want to tell you why I gave you this question. All right, this is back to understanding the terminology that makes up the field. And one of the surest ways to make sure that you understand a term is to be able to explain it to, like a third grader. Okay? Just using and ditch the jargon. Use very, very simple terms. Okay, Claire, let's take a look at you. First, Stacks explains that the normal curve is a statistical tool that tells us what confidence we can have in our sampling and the accuracy of our measurement. Stack then explains that the curve says that, quote, if we drew 100 people at random, the errors in the sampling would be more equally distributed and the probability of skewing would be reduced. With 250 randomly selected persons, we begin to see the traditional bell shape of the curve. 500 randomly selected person, the bell shape has been established. This distribution of samples, you have quotes here, good, becomes more evidently dispersed or distributed when we make more random selections, because most scores in a normal distribution cluster around the mean. Okay. Now that's not in simple language. You are correct, Claire. It's a good answer, but we're going to get back to that. But let's go to the second part of the answer. The confidence interval is how confident our sample accuracy is. It is at 95% because social scientists don't want, you wrote it right, I read it wrong. Don't want to be any more than 5% wrong. Okay. So, technically you're correct. All right, but what I would ask for is, if you had to explain to a group of people that didn't have any, hadn't been spending this semester studying quantitative research, had no backgrounds in statistics, how would you explain confidence interval? I would, to look at one way to do it. I'm not saying it's the way to do it, but look at one way to do it. Go back and look at that article. And this is for everybody, and I'm not speaking to you, Claire. Go back and look at that article that I gave you as the read for the bonus question back in week 12 that I wrote on children and vaccines. And in there, I included what I hope to be a simple, non-technical explanation of confidence interval. All right. And to, summarize it with a slight digression. I grew up intellectually, spiritually, in a rather unconventional manner. I was raised by Mormons, good people in religiously speaking. To which I owe much, my Mormon upbringing, specifically a deep sense of religiosity, that is a deep awe and wonder um, in the contemplation of the creative force. I mean, you didn't talk loudly. I mean, even above the slightest whisper in a Mormon church, and you would never have attended a service in shorts and a t-shirt. That was just not heard of. All right. There was a deep sense that there was something tremendous going on here. So I owe that to my Mormon community. On the other hand, theologically speaking, Mormonism, not being a Christian-based religion, has some fundamental beliefs that are they're trying to be charitable. They're pretty far out there, man. Um, and Mormonism, like other faiths, it's not unique in this, is significantly grounded in demonstration by emotion. Is how do you know what it is that you're being told is true? Well, what do you feel about it? Um, I will suggest to you, as an aside to this aside, that while emotion is a significant and important process by which one navigates the material world, it is an insufficient and I'll even go so far as to say ill-adaptive tool for things metaphysical. That is trying to come to grips with the nature of the creator and the created order is not well done with emotion, in the same way that trying to solve a complicated mathematical equation is not well done with emotion. You can feel however you want about an algebraic expression. Your feeling isn't going to lead you to the process that will get you the answer. That's what I'm talking about. So, as an emotive religion, Mormonism has some, and then some very unique theological or theological propositions. Has some problems baked into it. So I left Mormonism. All right. And I spent most of my formative educational years, high school, undergraduate, um, as a self-proclaimed atheist slash agnostic. I did a dual degrees in my bachelor here. That one was grounded in the sciences, and then the other in the humanities. So I studied biology, human anatomy, and physiology, and the processes involved there. And then I studied language and philosophy. So I came out of undergraduate school, like many, many people, with the belief that science was science. This is how we know things. And religion was emotion. And it really didn't have anything to do. There was no connection to this is how we know things. Okay. What I discovered later on, as I trained as a graduate, master's, and a PhD student, is that there's not a conflict, there's not a separation between the two, so-called faith and reason. The one actually supports and informs the other. So this brings us to confidence interval. Okay. On the faith side, the proposition is there's a single creator who, as a creator, is uncreated, created perfection. Okay, is responsible for all creation, including a plan for that creation and the creatures within the creation, us. In other words, material reality, says the theological side, is constructed in an ordered, intentional, and predictable way. Okay? Over to the scientific side. Okay? Quantitative research, the experimental method, is founded on the assumption that the physical reality in which we live is so predictably ordered from the orderer, but that's not, the recognition isn't there, is so predictably ordered that things happen in an ordered, repetitious way, a predictable way, over and over again. It's so ordered, material reality, it's boring. There is zero chance, for example, I'm just going to hold my hands here, that holding my hands here, a bunny rabbit will suddenly appear within them and then just as suddenly disappear. Why? Why can I say this? Without an intervening agent, like somebody walking through that door with a bunny rabbit, not going to happen, because I know material reality is predictable, and that's an unpredicted event. Okay? So the confidence interval says that things will happen in a predictable way unless something else acts on them. My hands will remain empty, just like this, unless somebody physically walks into the room and places a bunny rabbit in them. Otherwise, there will be no bunny rabbit. We can predict that with confidence. That's the confidence interval. Now, quantitative researchers, social scientists, typically set that confidence interval at 95% or higher. And although, Claire, you say they don't want to be any more than 5% wrong, that's sort of getting at it, that they know through repetitive observation that without an additional force acting on the event, my empty hands, let's say the event, my hands being here, this is the event, without an additional force acting on it, there is at a very bare minimum, a 95% chance that the event will stay exactly as it is without any change. 95% or higher. 95% or higher. Okay. In things that are, less dependent, like somebody walking into the door with a bunny rabbit and putting it in my hands, that's highly dependent on a lot of things, like somebody else in my office, bunny rabbits available, someone able to catch the bunny rabbit, someone having the desire to catch the bunny rabbit, and then the forethought to put it in my hands. There's a lot of a dependency. There's something that's less dependent. Say, if you flip a coin, right, and you flip a coin and you record the number of heads and the number of tails that appear on the coin. If this coin is flipped and there's nothing that interferes with the process of heads, tails, at a bare minimum, you'll get a 95% equal distribution between heads and tails, and a 5% or less interruption of that. So maybe you'll get, like, if you do it 100 times, let's just say, for example, maybe you get like 49 tails and 51 heads, or you get, like 50 heads and 50 tails. That would be 100% equal distribution. Okay, or you get 49 heads and 51 tails. Okay, now if that distribution is not equal 95% of the time or greater, something is acting on that coin. Like maybe it's a trick coin and one side is heavier than the other. Maybe you're doing it with somebody so you can concentrate on catching and flipping, and you're calling it out, going heads, tails, and they're a knucklehead. And 3 of the times that you say heads, they write down tails. That would be something else acting on the recording of the heads, tails flip. Okay, so if you get a distribution between heads and tails that's not equal, at least 90, at a minimum, 95% of the time, this is an indicator to you that there's a force acting on that coin. To go back to what I started with, this affirms theology, because at the heart of a monotheistic Christian worldview is the assumption that there's a single creator, an uncreated creator, a designer with a design that's perfect. And perfect means repetitive, means the same thing. You understand? So be able to explain things like confidence interval in very straightforward, non-scientific language, not only so that you can understand it, but that others can understand it. Okay, question, and that was a good answer, by the way, Claire. Question number 3. What are the key differences between a survey and a poll? Why poll? Not poll. That's my Western accent creeping out. Why is this distinction important for PR research and planning? Briefly explain your answer. Let's see, Valerie. Primary distinction between a survey and a poll are to their breadth, depth, and objectives. A poll is often concise and targeted, usually including many close-ended questions designed to swiftly access public opinion or views towards a certain problem. Conversely, a survey is more extensive, including a wide variety of questions and investigate many aspects of attitudes, behaviors, knowledge, often using both closed and open-ended questions. This differentiation. I'm just tired. This difference, that's not what you wrote, Valerie, but that's all I got in me. This difference is crucial in public relations research and planning, since every methodology, you wrote this just fine. It's my reading that is problematic, since each methodology addresses specific strategic requirements. Polls effectively capture timely reflection of popular mood, informing quick message or media reaction. Surveys provide profound insight for long-term planning, campaign assessment, and comprehensive stakeholder connection. Okay, excellent. That both of those definitions are good. There are a couple other differences to be aware of. Polls are frequently used not merely to capture a quick snapshot, but actually to inject ideas into the populace. These are sometimes, this tactic is sometimes referred to as push poll. And that's, it's a play on words. But what it means is that they're pushing an idea into the populace disguised as a poll. And they'll do this through the structuring of the questions. The questions will often something, and I'm just making this up, okay? I'm not taking a position one way or the other. The questions will be loaded with certain key phrases, and if they're done correctly, and I'll say before I give you the example, there's some debate within the PR world about the ethical nature of push polls, because you are in effect constructing a communication that you present as one thing. Oh, hey, just tell me what you think. But you actually intend as another. Hey, I'm going to tell you what to think. Okay, there's some ethical issues with that. But anyway, so they often contain key phrases or statements that, if they're done right, done well, I should say, have been pre-screened and pre-tested, or there's data behind them that suggests when people hear these words or phrases, that tends to push them towards position X or Y. Okay, so if, for example, someone might call you up and say, oh, we're the blah, blah, blah polling group, and we just want to get your opinion about how you think President Trump is doing in his first 100 days. And if you're inquisitive enough to stay on the line, which I'm usually not, because this is my job, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, I have a pie in the oven or something, is what I say, and I hang up. I don't bake pies, but you know what I mean. So anyway, we just like to hear what you think about President Trump's performance within his first 100 days, and you're like, okay, sure, ask me. Do you approve of President Trump's rapid and efficient deportation of hardcore Venezuelan gang members to a prison in El Salvador? And the idea here is to push that President Trump is quickly and effectively deporting hardcore Venezuelan gang members to a prison in El Salvador, and or everybody that President Trump has ordered, or I guess Ron Holman, head of Homeland Security, has determined to be sent to a prison in El Salvador is a hardcore Venezuelan gang member. It's pushing a perception and attitude out into the public disguised as a poll. Okay, so that's the other element about polls that I want you to keep in mind. Surveys, and as good answers, you rightly point out, Valerie, that they provide insight. And by the way of insight, what I want you to remember, and this may appear somewhere else, like on a test, a wink. What researchers are looking for is causation. What causes what? Okay. Surveys are designed to give a researcher the data necessary to make conclusions about causation and sort through what is correlation, that is things happening at the same time but are not related, and what is causation, things happening at the same time and the one is actually causing the other. Okay, because that's ultimately the goal. Okay, everybody, that's week 13. All right. I think I mentioned in the last video, but I'll mention again, I am grading your draft PR plans this week, so you get some feedback as you move towards completing the final plan. If you have any questions about, my comments or something, send me an email or catch me during my office hours and we will address them. All right, everybody. Good work. Hang in there. 3 more weeks left. You got this. I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.